2 years ago, I went to America and I came back in February. My CEO said, go home. 2 years later, I came back home, and today's my first day back. So welcome, everybody. I must thank Mike Morgan for putting this together. I must also thank Mike Morgan as our CEO of Sancham to bring us all together as he does, and to build the network that he has done over the last 5 years. Mike, a special thanks to you. I must also thank NRF for presenting the space and for providing the space and for the cookies and the muffins that you have available to you to eat. My name is Greg Knott. I'm the American. I mean, that's a real slip of the tongue. I'm the Canadian Chamber of Commerce chairperson, and it's a privilege to be here, and it's a privilege to welcome all of you here today to enjoy what we are going to hear about South Africa, and what a more opportune time that we have to listen to the professor speak about that. My special thanks also goes to my colleague Avish Maharaj, who is head of BD, for putting this together, Avish, and I must thank you. Where are you? There you are. You hide so nondescriptly. Thank you very much for putting this together very much, and for working so closely with Mike as you have over the years. My deep appreciation to you. As again, I can't keep on saying appreciate, but I do appreciate all of you for being members of the Chamber, for growing the Chamber as it is. It's growing by leaps and bounds, and by no less than by the hard, industrious work of our CEO, Mike Morgan. Michael, a special thanks to you again. Well, it was the inception of late 2017 that we first started the Chamber, and it's been the last couple of years that we've been able to put together ourselves in a room so that we can look at each other beyond masks and with COVID protocols still in place. So welcome, everybody. Now I'm going to introduce you to Lynette Magasa, CEO of Bonisa Solutions, to formally introduce our professor and our guest speaker for today. Again, I'm going to say it one more time just to bore you. Welcome, and thank you for coming to North Roseville Park. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much. I'm not sure whether you can hear me. I'll try and speak louder. Thank you. Professor Bonang Mohale, the President of Business Unit South Africa, Chairman of Bidvest, and highly acclaimed author of the recent book, Behold the Title. We are delighted and honored to have you to address us on the subject of imagining a revitalized South Africa. And yes, we can. Ladies and gentlemen, what I will do is I'd just like to just go through a brief bio for Professor, and then I will introduce him to you. So what the bio goes like this. Bonang Francis Mohale is the Chancellor of the University of Free State, Professor of Practice in Johannesburg Business School, College of Business and Economics. He's the Chairman of the Bidvest Group Limited and Chairman of SEV. He is highly respected South African businessman who is as much for his patriotism and his active role in seeking to advance the country's interest. He is the author of the best-selling book, Lift As You Rise, launched in November 2018, a compilation of some of his spoken words and written words on which Mohale reveals the issue he is passionate about, amongst them leadership, transformation, people development, constructive collaboration, and integrity. He was the Chief Executive Officer of Business Leadership South Africa, BLSA, till June 2019. BLSA brings together the leadership of South Africa's most successful and influential big businesses and multinational investors to exchange ideas, facilitate effective dialogue with government and other stakeholders, and advocate for pro-business economical sustainable policies and programs. Prior to joining BLSA, Mr. Mohale ended a distinguished term as Vice President, Upstream, and Chairman of Shell South Africa Pty Ltd. At the end of June 2017. Mr. Mohale, who originally studied to be a medical doctor, has had a distinguished career at helm and in leadership roles of several major South African and multinational companies, including Otis Elevators, South African Airways, Sanlam Limited, and Drake and Skull Integrated Facility Management. He currently serves as the board of Swiss Re Africa Limited, Rand Merchant Bank Limited, and SPV. Mr. Mohale has an impressive track record of building successful companies, delivering results, and making significant advances in transforming the companies as he has privileged to lead. He has been a vocal, courageous, and active prominent transformation since the 1980s and played a leadership role in the Black Management Forum for over 33 years, where he was the president. He's got quite a few recognition awards. Some of the awards, he was awarded the Free Marketing Foundation Luminary Award for 2019 in recognition of the outstanding courageous and integrity he has displayed through difficult times in his contribution to the country and community for defending the rights for all South Africans. Winner of the Forbes Women African Male Gender Advocate Award for 2019. Mr. Bonang was conferred with an honorary professorship in marketing management by the University of Pretoria, where he served as their advisory council since 1992. He received the Presidential Award for his servanthood in South African industry and economic empowerment of previously disadvantaged individuals. What is not on his bio is the fact that Prof. Mohale is also a very humble, authentic human being that really believes in the fact that one has to grow a special muscle to lift others as you go up. We are very honored as a chamber, Prof, to have you, and without any delays, we can't wait to hear from you. Welcome to the chamber.
So I'm going to stand there if he allows me. And I don't know if you are recording it, but if you can hear me, I suppose it's okay. Am I okay here or here?
Okay.
It doesn't matter. So the value, the utility is in the conversation that we're going to have afterwards, because that's when it's really going to be a dialogue. Just to show that I'm prepared, maybe I'll touch on 3 buckets as a way of introduction. But thank you so much, my very first public, in-person conversation, and it's almost a full house. I am touched, humbled, and honored. I think we all begin to die when we are silent about things that genuinely matter. I think it's about time that the good guys spend as much time, energy, and effort as the bad guys do in trying to fix some of the challenges that are keeping us awake at night. We met with the President of the Republic on the 28th. But we had met him before in preparation for the State of the Nation address. I thought, as business units, I thought we were quite explicit in asking him that we don't want another bucket list of the things that we've done, let alone 28 things of the things that we have to do. We are in a hole. And if you can focus on 4, no more than 5 critical issues, maybe, just maybe, we can tell the fortunes of Nelson Mandela dreams. The South Africa all of us are praying for. The South Africa that all of us have been dreaming of. In that list, we said he's sitting at the moment with a number of reports. In our humble opinion, we felt the most significant is the Zondo report number 1, 2, and 3. But at the same time, he was sitting with the eminent persons report about the 2 weeks in July of rampant looting. And we impressed on him that the focus must be on execution, because that's where we are particularly bad. The doing. If there was an Olympic sport for developing players, I think we'd win hands down. General George Patton reminds us that great wars are won by good execution, not great plans. Because good execution will save even a mediocre plan. Secondly, we said to the President, after implementing the recommendations of the Zondo report that we as Business Unity South Africa fully support, we have to choose a few things in which we as business are prepared to invest. And we want to invest for growth. Because if the economy is not growing, very soon we'll be talking about the redistribution of poverty, not the redistribution of wealth. We also said we need to invest in the productive side of the economy, not the consumption. Like we do in our households when we have money, you try and stretch it so that it goes further, not just to eat and consume. And infrastructure is one such, where even if we put it in roads and dams and bridges, at least our children will be able to enjoy that, rather than on social security. Because the math doesn't add up. There were 60.1 million South Africans when we met the President. Before COVID, 16.5 million were employed by the private sector. The 3 tiers of government employed 2.3 million people. So if we could transform the private sector, South Africa would be transformed. But there's a whopping 70 million people on social security before COVID. When we announced not the 500 billion socio-economic stimulus as a response to the pandemic, but the 350 grants, 14 million people applied, 11 million were granted. You add them to the 70, that's 28 million people who are on social security and supported by only 60 million people. You can see that it's not sustainable. We also said to the President, let's also pay particular attention in law and order, crime and security, because without law and order, who are we and what are we? Because at the moment in South Africa, crime pays. Pays because when you see how 28 years into democracy, we are so deep in a hole that we should be acting like companies that are desperate for a turnaround. But to go on as if it's business as usual. So number one, we hold world records for all the long lessons. We are now the most unequal society in the world. We took over in 2010 from Brazil with a Gini coefficient of 0.6. We are the country with the highest unemployment in the world at 46.6%. They say on an expanded definition. This is an ILO definition because it says you exclude those people that have given up looking for work in the last 36 months. So in the last 23 months, who could be looking for a job? Because all of us were in lockdown. But also we have the highest SME failure rate in the world. We chose to be part of the BRICS trade bloc. Our Greek counterparts, new jobs created by SMEs are north of 60%. In South Africa, south of 15%. No wonder the most biggest systemic risk we are confronted to today is youth unemployment at 74.9%. When you have young people of military age sitting at home and twiddling their thumbs with nothing to do, not only are we asking for trouble, but we are actively inviting it. Maybe the second challenge, of course, is the reliable, predictable energy supply, not as energy supply, because energy is the fourth means of production, the first being land, and there is no possession greater than land. But we also have the second highest suicide rate in the world after Russia. But where we really hold the record, and I'll end on that, on this segment, is we have the highest femicide rate in the world. Not by a factor of 2, 5 times more than the global number. So how does this manifest to ordinary South Africans who feel in their back pocket, who feel in terms of their safety and security? I said inequality is widening. Racism is at an all-time high. Black graduates are roaming the streets hopelessly. Public education has collapsed. Public health care continue to fail the poor and the vulnerable. And crucial infrastructure is laying by. Lawlessness has now become an epidemic. Let me make an example of the 2 weeks in July of this rampant looting and the attempted insurrection. So when you look at the figures on the 19th of July, we had already killed more than 354 people. We have destroyed 114 schools, with one school in KwaZulu-Natal went up in flames within 1 hour of this medicine. We vandalized 200 malls. We burned 8 warehouses, 11 factories. We raided 1,400 ATMs. We stole 120 million rands. Not even the South African Blood Bank was spared this madness. When people went in order to get their hands on the fridges, they spilled the blood on the floor to take these fridges, knowing fully well that as they get out of here, they themselves might need the blood group type because they might have been hit by the rubber bullet. So why did all of us feel this collective trauma where the people who are constitutionally mandated to protect us folded their arms and did nothing? Maybe just 3 buckets in the interest of time. So the people who did the looting, you could see, there's the dirty dozen known because they're on social media, who have been saying ban everything. And as we speak today, none of those are in prison. No. The evidence on social media, they've been deleted. Then there's a small minority. Then there's another small minority, just pure criminality. People who pulled up luxury SUVs, took flat screens, and tried to fit them in their cars. Not because they need them, but because they can. There's a big part in the middle that should keep you and I awake. Almost 80% of the people that went looting out of genuine desperation. And that genuine desperation we could almost understand because we were just putting our arms around the 9 wasted years of state capture. By the way, President Jacob Zuma did not invent state capture. He just perfected it. He was just clumsy about it. With him, it was industrial scale beauty. In 5 years, they stole 1.5 trillion South African rand. That's 2/3 of what it takes Edward Kisveta to collect from you and I in businesses in the whole year. In those 9 wasted years, we talk about on average 200 billion just being siphoned off to the 2 Zulu families. Imagine how many people are treating toilets with food we could have eliminated. Just in Limpopo alone, where there's still 2,250. How many Michael Komabis and Lumka, 5-year-olds, who could be running around amongst us with shrieks of laughter rather than dying a sad, tragic, and regrettable death in a pit tree. So we are poor by choice. The choice of leaders that we make. Because Africa is not a poor continent, just poor in money. Because every mineral that the world needs is found here as either number 1 or number 2. This glorious continent of 1.3 billion people, the same population as India, second only to China at 1.4 billion. 55 countries that speak 30,000 languages with 30.3 million square kilometers of pristine coastline. God's own country, blue skies, African sunshine. No country like it anywhere else in the world where you can look any tourist in the face and say, whatever you want, we have it in abundance. So why did we then find ourselves in that spot of the world? One is because we were quite deliberate in saying we are going to have a small SAPS, South African Police Service, but that is nonetheless intelligence-led. So instead of spending the money on intelligence to be informed and pre-warned, we decided to eat it. State Security Agency, during the Jacob Zuma era, when they would withdraw him from this slush fund, the minimum they were taking out was 21 million at the time. And we had, at that time, 150,000 SAPS members. The private security industry, 550,000. We've just increased that number now, 280,000. So we send women and men to go and confront these looters, who for the first time in the history of this country were armed. Because these are the people who can steal guns at police stations. They are so brazen, they go to army depots and they go to the stores and they steal weapons of war. That's why when they hit a cash in transit, it's normally a gang of no less than 25 with AK-47s and R5 rifles. And our poor SAPS with a 9mm parabellum at best, going to this fight with a penknife when the guys have real firepower. So we sent these women who didn't have enough cars, who didn't even have enough bullet-proof vests, they didn't have enough rubber bullets, they didn't have enough tear gas canisters. So their confidence was battered. And what hope did we have that we're going to stop this looting? That again, in 28 years, we're witnessing for the first time. I don't know whether we'll ever recover from that. Before I stop, maybe just some 2 words on this pandemic. So the president sets us a herd immunity target of 67% in January. That's 40 million South Africans. So it means we ought to have been inoculating at a rate of 100,000 a day every day. Had we done that, it would have taken us 400 days or 13.3 months, which means we were planning, agitating, and orchestrating to finish only in 2022. So we finished the year with 32 million vaccines administered, not 32 million people fully vaccinated. So we missed this target again by a mile. We don't want to be known as a country that sets itself targets knowing it's going to miss it. In the private sector, when you give a budget to your board, it's a contract, it's not a suggestion. And if you don't meet it, there are consequences. So as we stand today, the high-income countries, on average, has 67% of their population fully vaccinated. Most European countries, North America, they are north of 90%, so they can relax the regulations to say you can go wherever you want without masks, without the non-pharmaceutical interventions. Because at 90%, you are okay. If it hits you, it will be like mild flu symptoms. With us, we're not there yet. So let's say we're on 30%, we wanted to do 40%. Deaths are almost 97,000, I'm rounding off the figures. 3.6 million that are infected. But the scientists tell us that that number should be at least 3 times more when you look for unaccounted deaths. So let's say it's 300,000. But because of the people that have been exposed, because if you live in Alexander in a formal settlement, 970,000 people in a 6 square kilometer radius, and you go to a shibin in a shack, and there's 12 of you drink out of Ingundu, 750 ml, and you give another one. We estimate that we have probably already have reached herd immunity by the people who have been, in fact, they didn't even know. 90% of them, remember, are asymptomatic. So they might have built their own herd immunity. So there's 22 countries that have opened their borders to say as long as you are fully vaccinated, you can come. You see, vaccine rollout as an end has always been a race. Because the country that can say first, we've defeated and rooted this pandemic, will then be able to reap the pent-up global tourism demand. Why does tourism matter for us? Because countries that are visited by you and I, on average, get about 180 million people at the top end. I'm talking about Italy, Rome, in particular. And in South Africa, before COVID, we had 10.2 million people visitors. Tourism and hospitality broadly contributed 9.8% to our GDP. Let's say 10% amongst us. But it employs 2.3 million people, 75% of them are women. There's 33,000 people that work at Sun City alone to mow the lawn and clean and replace the toilet paper in the loops. So when you close Sun City, you can see how many people are indeed affected. So all in all, I think we've lost about 2.2 million jobs. If each one of them look after 5 people, that's 10 million people. But again, what really keeps us awake at night, my grandmother used to say, when your neighbor is hungry, you cannot sleep at night. Is the 10 million young people that are not in education, employment, and training. 6 million men who don't know their father. 30% of households that have both a mother and a father. Let me stop there and take some questions, comments. So so that we have our heart close at 12. My name is Bonang.
Thanks so much. We've got about 10 minutes for questions before I call on Dr. Ralph Heath for some concluding remarks and a vote of thanks. So who would like to kick off with a question? Greg, would you like to go ahead?
So let me say I've noted Greg. Let me see this side. Going once. You'll be number 1. You'll be number 2. And look this side. You'll be number 3. Greg can go to hell. In that order.
Thanks. You just exposed me now, Ralph.
I know. After this, I'm running away.
Yeah, it's quite funny actually. I'm going to speak about the young generation in terms of brain drain. Actually, I went to school with Mr. Mohale's nephew actually. I went to my class actually. And so I wanted to talk about this brain drain situation because I have friends that went to my class, also St. John's, St. Stephen's. And what I'm seeing now is a lot of my counterparts are going to UCT or doing the undergrad abroad, and they're contemplating on staying abroad and getting a dual citizenship in Canada, the UK, and this, that. And so how can we prevent young guys like me from just packing our bags, going to Dubai, going to Canada, and not coming back?
You won't stay in a country that's not safe, where you can't go jogging.
Sorry, but you just hold it. Sorry, Avish, are these?
Yeah, they're active. You just have to press the button at the bottom and bring them
Oh,
down.
there's a button on here.
Yeah.
Can you just test it? Hello? John, please, you can activate your loudspeaker. Sorry, I should have pointed that out to you. Sorry.
Except I can hear them very well.
Well, I think it's easy for the people down there, mate.
Okay.
You comfortable with that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
So you don't have to repeat it. I think they heard it.
Okay.
It's their problem. So I'm just saying you won't stay in a country where you don't feel safe, where you can't even walk, let alone jog around your neighborhood. You won't stay when you're unemployed. At the moment, it's black graduates, engineers that are not getting a job. And you can understand, I mean, in a pandemic, companies were laying off people. The company that I chair, the Beavers Group Limited, before the pandemic, we employed 135,000 people, 7 divisions. We had 350 organizations, 250 of them are operating entities. We retrenched 10,000 people. We're in the top 40 of the listed entities on the JSE. Now that we're going back, of course, we go to those people and giving them the first right of refusal. But it's tough. So I think as a country, we should be laying the red carpet for young people that have graduated. We should lay the red carpet for people who are coming here to invest. But it takes you 3 years, a minimum of 350,000 to start a business in this country. In Singapore, it takes you not 2 days, 2 hours. That's why in our conversation with the president, we said, you must have a red tape czar. And after a number of iterations, we ended up with Babusi Nkosi, whose job it is to keep down these obstacles that are put on the way of people that want to start businesses and paid for by the private sector. I'll come back to you. Who's number 2?
Dr. Bonang, thank you. So it's quite
Sorry,
refreshing.
please activate your mic.
Oh, sorry.
There's a button on the side. There you go.
It's quite refreshing to get your analysis of the state of affairs, and I feel like I've just gotten a summary of the state of the nation. And it's unfortunate that it seems quite bleak. And I guess in line with the question that was asked by my fellow brother there, I'm wondering in terms of imagining a revitalized South Africa and a yes we can type of spirit, especially for some of us who may not have a proximity to policy making and to political interventions and the likes. I'm just wondering, with all of these challenges, what does a measured approach for, let me just say, for normal citizens, what does that look like for us to remain motivated towards building this country in the same way that you come across, but of course at your level. But to say that when you look at us, there are also foot soldiers who, in their day-to-days, there's something they're doing. I'm just wondering whether you can tease out some comments around that.
Yeah, absolutely. So on Tuesday, we celebrated Stats SA release of the GDP figures for the fourth quarter. So this is October, November, December of 2021. And we celebrated that the GDP for that quarter has grown by positive 1.8%. So year on year compared to the same period last year, 4.6%. We celebrate. But so that we are pragmatist, when you grow at 1.8% per quarter, the population growth is 1.5%. So it means for that quarter, actually we stood still. When we say let's celebrate the 4.6% because it's almost 5%, that's the highest we've ever hit for a full year, probably in October of 2017. But remember, the 5 was of last year's 6% contraction, minus 6%. So the base was already low. So what needs to be done so that we get hope? A few things to send a strategic message that says we're open for business. It's not about doing 120 things. Number one, I think because of its magnitude, we need to send the top state capture miscreants to jail. Number two, we have to complete the vaccine rollout because for us, it's a question of life and death. We've always wanted to do 3 things with this pandemic. We emphasize 2. Save lives, preserve livelihoods. But the only way we are going to break the link between the coronavirus cases and deaths is through vaccinations. At the moment we say there's a hesitancy. Of course there's a hesitancy. But try going for your booster, which I did on Sunday the 6th. Most of the major hospitals are actually closed, but they are trying to encourage people to take their boosters. St. Medical Clinic was closed. Clinics at Benmore Gardens, they said they closed at 3, but I was there before 3, they had run out of vaccines. So I quickly went to Sentin City, Discan, and they said they closed at 3. This is Friday. But they had run out of vaccines. So I went to Discovery very quickly. I get there, it's 15:12, and they were taking the posters that show you where to go. They said, no, we close at 3, but we open on Saturday morning. But on Saturday morning I was going to a funeral of a family friend, so I couldn't. So on Sunday I did the same thing again, but fortunately clinics at Sentin City, they were open. So at about maybe 11 in the morning, I got my booster shot. As a country that wants to show that we're in business, we should have been saying these vaccine centers must be open 24/7, 7 days a week. That's how you send the message, especially because we're already behind. Thirdly, I think we need to reduce our government debt at 89% debt to GDP ratio. It's already too high. It's not the percentage in and of itself, because this excludes guarantees to the more than 740 state-owned enterprises and state-owned companies. If you add those, it goes to 110%. And we don't have the money. So when government wants to do something, it reprioritizes from other government departments. When we went to government as a business to say, yes, you want to put money aside for our own vaccination program, actually we don't have it. Let's get onto the COVAX program because it's cheaper. And then the AU program. Let's say they wanted 250 million. We said, as business, we pay the first tranche. When can you pay the second tranche? They said by the 15th of December. I said, okay. By the 28th of December, business had to pay the second tranche because there was no money. You see, if you steal money, eventually it gets finished. And that's where we are now. There is no money. We just have to look at the size of the potholes. But also we must reduce are public sector wage men. During the 9 wasted years of President Jacob Zuma, it was just hiring friends to create a crucible of voters, buying votes as it were, with your and my money. So of what Edward Gitzberger collects every year from companies, yourself, VET, etc., on average about 1.4 billion. 70% goes to 3 buckets. The first bucket is social security. The second, of course, is servicing debt. More than anything else. We haven't even addressed the structural inequality that affects most black people. Spatial planning that we haven't even addressed. Most black people live on average 40 kilometers away from their places of work, by desire, not by anything else. Which means they spend 40 minutes one way and 40 minutes coming back every day, which then gobbles up 40% of their monthly wages. When you add food, that's 70%, which means structurally a majority of them can't even think of saving. Not because they don't know basic economics. To give you an example with ESCOM. ESCOM 2010 had 48,000 employees. Before then it had 32,000. And its debt is now approaching 500 billion, which means even if you leave them alone and say, trade yourself out of this debt, in 150 years, they'll be unable to do so. So you have to deal with that debt because it's now becoming a systemic risk. And then, of course, lastly, in the interest of time, I would say, fix the more than 740 state-owned enterprises and state-owned companies. Because you are my brother, I would say 740 of them, more, let me just say 700. Had we put in black people and women to be MD CEOs of these SOEs, and we allowed them to serve only one term of 5 years, even with 20% of them failing, today we'll be looking at 30,000 women and men that have a demonstrable track record of how to run SOEs and SOCs. Some of these SOEs are bigger than most African countries' economies. Transnet, ESCOM, SAA. I mean, SAA 2010 employed 11,000 people. They were 30 billion rands turnover entity. They spent 15 billion just in the procurement of 2 things. In fact, the whole 15 billion was on Jet A1 fuel. Jet A1 fuel, just on Jet A1 fuel. And of course, you have to concentrate on education, because education is the shortest way in which you can transcend social classes. Born in Alexander, poor in an informal settlement, 25 years of hard work and application, you can afford a house in the leafy suburbs of Branston. Not because you want a tender, but because you can afford it with earned and deserved.
Thanks, Bonang. Dave Lansard from the Centre for Risk Analysis. So, in the President's State of the Nation address, he said that it's not the role of government to create jobs, it's business's role, right? And it seems to me that business has a unique opportunity to advocate more aggressively for its role in economic growth, because without business, we're not going to have any wealth creation, we're not going to lift people out of poverty. But it also seems to me that business is playing the consensus game when it comes to policies that are actually quite harmful to economic growth. And you mentioned a lot of the high unemployment rates in South Africa, which are absolutely lamentable and which create a massive socioeconomic risk for South Africa. So if we have 74% of young people locked out of the labour market, that energy is going to be dissipated through our society, and that's we're going to be potentially seeing a lot of social unrest. So, if you consider an environment like Nederland, for example, business, to my mind, should be making a much more aggressive case for reforming, for example, the labour market. To say, listen, the Basic Conditions of Employment Act, the Labour Relations Act, the National Minimum Wage Act, these act as a handbrake on our activity. But why did Bidvest have to sack 10,000 employees? Those are 10,000 families that now don't have a breadwinner. And then you scale that up. So, Neil Froneman of Sibanye is saying we need to move away from the consensus approach to a more transactional approach, that business is willing to cooperate with government, then government also needs to play its part in loosening up and liberalizing the economy. And the president is talking the talk when it comes to reform. We're not seeing the actual action.
Absolutely correct. I couldn't agree with you more. Honestly, I couldn't have put it better. So at the moment, business ends up doing things that are not in their purview and it's not their responsibility. When I spoke about the 4 or 5 things that we discussed with the president, the one that I left out deliberately is this notion of a capable state. Because I thought it would lead us through a rabbit hole. But this government is not capable, period. That's what the reformer was saying, that it's a dysfunctional state with absolutely no leadership. When you look at NEDLEC is dysfunctional. Because NEDLEC was actually world class. Here's 4 parties around the room. Initially, it was trade, government, labor, and business, talking about anything and everything. And we made progress. It was chaired by the president. At the very least, when you outsource that chairing, you give it to the Minister of Finance or somebody in the economic cluster. But they juniorized. It's government who made NEDLEC to be dysfunctional because they go behind NEDLEC and don't discuss with people that they want to discuss, whatever they discuss, especially late as part of the tripartite alliance. So we've been very vocal in saying, restore NEDLEC to what it has been, reform it, reimagine, repurpose it, all that stuff. Because it can take you 9 months just of the conversations, and it's not like we got the time. Lastly, in the interest of time, the role of business broadly should not be transactional. I think it's an unfortunate choice of word. Our children are heavily invested in this country because it's their future we play with. You and I are yesterday. So we should be making sure that these kids come up into positions of leadership now, not tomorrow. We should be investing in education. We should be saying, as business, we'll still be here for another 100 years. That's not transactional. It's a partnership approach that says, you know, a partner is the one that speaks for you when you're not in the room. That's the one that has your back. And there's more young people than there are. 60% of the 60.1 million South Africans are 35 years and younger. I wanted to have the last word so that we can still have a hard close at 12 with the greatest of respect.
Thank you for your insights, Professor. And this is really not a legal question at all. It's really one coming from an issue of Ubuntu. And it really follows on from NEDLAC, and it refers to the interaction between government and business people itself. 12 years ago, I sat at one of the disempowerment crises regarding power failures. And at the end of the questioning, the industrialist said, how do we approach government? This was about maybe 12, 15 years ago. Just recently, about a couple of months ago, we were faced in one of our regions a very serious downstream oil production issue where the whole region could have been without oil. All it had to be was a telephone call to one of the government persons and a telephone call to the CEO of the downstream person, both of whom didn't have each other's telephone call. My question really is, how do we embrace that NEDLAC position? How do we embrace the Ubuntu that we've all come together here today as one being? How do we talk as South Africans together as one mission, one objective, so that we can actually get a hold of these objectives as we can meet the goals?
Just some sound bites, my brother, because again, you're absolutely spot on. So let me start first by saying, I went to Dubai recently and spoke to the Minister of Economic Affairs. And he said, you know, based on what you are discussing with us, let me call the responsible minister. In the office, call the responsible minister and say, I've got somebody here who wants to invest in this country. He looked and says, it's 10:15. I could be in the office at 10 o'clock. The call was made at 10 o'clock, he was in the office. Those are countries that say, I'm open for this. And similarly, in Singapore, we went as a delegation of 22 just before the G7, so the B20 Tokyo on our preparation to Osaka, where these presidents will then sign the commitments. In Singapore, we spoke to the Prime Minister. And in speaking to the Prime Minister said, you know what, we are all here as part of the panel. There's a lunch break at 1 to 2 o'clock. Can I get one of your ministers to join us at lunchtime? Who wasn't part of that? And guess what? We were joined by the responsible minister at 1 o'clock. Those are companies and countries that send the message that says we're open for business. Here we think it's an honor when you want to speak to a minister. You write a letter for 3 months. It has not even been acknowledged. I think we are wrong in piloting, highlighting, and celebrating people that were voted into positions of leadership. And then when they walk into the room, we stand up as if we serve them, whereas they serve us. I think we are wrong, 28 years into democracy, to say the way we choose our leaders, it's not working. And we continue to do the same things all over again. We should put you in and say, fix Alexander. You've got 5. If you haven't fixed it, say, sorry, we gave you a chance. Let's give it to somebody else who's got more energy, more imagination to be able to fix it. We're not even doing those things. Let me just conclude, and then I sit down and hand over your program.
Sorry, Prof, I wasn't just blaming government itself. It's less rest with industrialists as well as government as well, to be able to talk to one another.
You just read my mind, because that's what I wanted to end on to say. But what then is the role of business in general in a functioning democracy? For me, I think it's just to be a trusted advisor, a partner of choice, and doing everything possible to make sure that government becomes a capable state. Because we have learned that it's easier to deal with a capable state than the one that is less capable. At the moment, as business, you have said, we put in that capacity. The vaccine rollout is a good example. Not only did we put in, profit is a good word, by the way, it's not a solo. Because without profits, you can't do much. So we put in a team together. We had 400 volunteers. We call it B4SA. We met every week with the Department of Health and the Minister of Health. We would issue out statements about what we've done. You have been extremely generous with your time. Mine says 2 minutes past 12. I apologize for being 2 minutes late.
Thanks for being so gracious. That will make wonderful headlines. Expose me there. Bonang, thanks so much for the enlightening chat. Factual, robust research just emerges as hope for the future. Gives us some form of inspiration that yes, we can. And we know what to do. Let's roll up our sleeves. Let's get out there and let's do what we have to do. And I believe it's institutions such as Second Gen and the like that can drive business, bring business closer to government, and let's hold some feet to the fire. I like your point, David. I think we really need to start playing a better advocacy role in a constructive fashion and not apologize for the need to do so. Enough from me. It's now my privilege to call on Dr. Ralph Heath, the Managing Director of WSP Africa, for some concluding remarks and a vote of thanks. Thank you so much, Ralph.
Thank you, and I'm not going to use a mic, but first, I mean, it's very difficult to say thank you after that really enlightening speech, but from the Chamber's point of view, you know, it was really awesome to hear that and some of the insights that you gave. Just from a personal point of view, you know, Lift As You Rise has been part of our company's culture. We've transformed ourselves organically to level 1B over the years, and it's really important that we've listened to what you've advocated in there. So also, hit by a bus is one of the analogies has always been real for me, getting my successor in place, so that we're on that route. And then the thing that was also underpinned everything was your strong Christianity in the book, and you know, certainly everything you said today also is about people, about growing, about economy and all together. So that also comes through very strongly in all the things you said today. The realities of business, the role of the business, we've had lots of good discussions on that. It is our responsibility. The comments about, you know, when I manage to go overseas, and I do quite often, I can get to the DRC and whatever the case may be, and you want to see the government ministers, they arrive and say, how can we help you? It's not what are you giving away, and it's getting that philosophy into our country is fundamental. And in the role of business, to make money, absolutely, by making money we can breed success, and that's it. Professor, thank you very, very much. Really insightful, and I'm sure we all gained immensely. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Once again, Prof, from my side, thank you. You're a wonderful inspiration to so many young people, and listening to you on 7:02 yesterday afternoon. I know you didn't want to take my call because you said I didn't qualify. Please join us if you want to have a quick chat. I know you've got some time available. If you want to have a quick chat with us, please interact with one another. This is our first opportunity in 2022 to do so. I think there is some coffee, there's something to bite there, Avish, am I right? Yeah. Please guys, don't rush away, and of course, please let Ariel have your name and telephone number for the book. I will then make sure that I contact you, get a personal message, and I'll get Prof from at his office to sign it. So please don't rush away, spend some time together. Once again, I wish thank you to Norton Rose, Fulbright, and yourself for making this possible. Thank you. Enjoy your day.
Everybody.